Hello, welcome to the Wellesley Career Education webinar for writing personal statements. I'm going to get started in just a sec. If you have not already turned on the chat function for your on your Zoom interface, please do that. If you have questions as we go along, that's the easiest way to ask them, and we may try to answer them as we go. At the very least, we will get to them at the Q&A at the end, but we're really curious to see how we can help you out with various things. So thank you for joining us. We're delighted to have you here. We're very sorry again for the technical difficulties we encountered on Thursday evening that meant that we couldn't do it then, but we're delighted to have you join us now. So welcome to Writing Personal Statements. I'm Kate Dalinger. I'm the Director of Fellowship Programs here in Wellesley Career Education. I've been doing fellowships advising for more than a decade, and I've worked with a lot of students and alums working on personal statements for fellowships, for graduate school, and for a myriad of different purposes. And so I am delighted to be able to share that with you. I'm joined today by my colleague, Caitlin Roberts-Donovan, who's the Program Manager for Fellowships, and she has all kinds of great things to share as well. So if you hear a second voice, that's who that is. If you could please enter into the chat box what kind of thing you're applying for. Are you applying for graduate or professional school? Are you applying for internships this coming fall? Are you applying for fellowships? Are you undecided and just kind of doing this on spec? No matter why you've tuned into the webinar, this is a good we're delighted that you've done it, but if you have particular purposes, I'm delighted to try to tailor the presentation to meet your particular interests. So, thank you so much for joining us. Here we go. Where to begin? It is actually not by writing, believe it or not. The writing process can be difficult and can be challenging, and writing a personal statement can be particularly daunting. But the good news is you have already learned how to be good at applying for things. After all, you've all gotten into Wellesley. Unfortunately, most application processes after that don't look like the college admissions process, whether you're applying for jobs or for graduate or professional school or for fellowships. This requires you to learn new genres of application, but you can do this. You've already learned to deal with different kinds of writing exercises, whether writing college papers versus the papers you wrote in high school, or you're trying to figure out the difference between a mathematical proof or a lit-crit essay. They're all different genres, and this is yet another one, and you can learn this too. Despite the pencils on screen and the connotations, at least for me, of taking standardized tests, personal statements aren't standardized. And I know that, again, that can be daunting, but it also means that this is a great opportunity for you to be able to play to your own strengths and interests and to represent who you are as an individual, because none of us is standard. The place to begin is by doing a little bit of sleuthing. Whatever it is you're applying for, have you found the right fit? Does this make sense for you? What makes you a good fit for the program? You're Wellesley students or graduates, which means that you have great research skills and you're developing those all the time. Put those mad skills to use and do a little homework before you even start writing. The sleuthing can involve logistics. Just trying to figure out what exactly is required of the application at hand. Are you eligible for this? Are there entry requirements? What do the deadlines look like? What are the various application components? What are the things you need to pull together as part of your application? Frequently, it's not just a personal statement, right? There are usually other elements. And so you want to think about your application as a whole. What does the application look like? Applications, depending on what it is that you're applying for, may also involve a cover letter or a statement of interest, as well as the personal statement that we'll be talking more about today. It might include a resume or an academic CV. It might include transcripts or research proposals, samples of work, letters of reference, language evaluations. Part of the application process may or may not be an interview. Think about all of the different pieces, the short answers, the long essays. think as you're starting to work on the application, not just how you do answer each individual question or how you have the strongest possible resume, but also how the pieces, each one builds off the one before it in the application, how the pieces complement one another. You want them to add up to something greater than the sum of the parts. And notice that because there are other pieces of the application, the personal statement doesn't have to say everything. Isn't that a relief? The other thing is that you don't have to say everything. In particular, you don't have to blow your own horn. That's the job for your recommenders. And so you want to think about, especially if there are letters of reference or recommenders, choose them wisely. You want expert witnesses who can help you make your case that what you're applying for makes sense, that you have the appropriate background, skills, training, etc., to make a success of whatever it is you're proposing to do. So you want to think about who is in the best position to serve as an expert witness on your behalf. Think not only about who you are and what your background is, but what exactly the particular application at hand is for. If you were, for example, to apply for a PhD in astrophysics, the English professor with whom you wrote a whole series of wonderful autobiographical pieces might know you really well as a person, but probably is not in the best position to be able to say whether or not you seem well poised to be able to do good graduate work in astrophysics. So you want, again, to think about not just how well people know you, but what their own area of expertise is and what they've seen you do. The other thing is that ideally you don't have to start by saying, oh, would you write me a letter for whatever it is or serve as a reference for whatever it is. You can start the conversation by seeking advice on your application. It's helpful if you can do this as far in advance of the deadline as possible. Again, remember those logistics piece and trying to figure out what the deadlines are. Not only can you get good advice on putting together a strong application and finding the right fit, but the more that you can have some conversations with your projected recommenders, even if they know you really well, if they haven't talked specifically with you about what it is you're applying for, it makes it harder for them to write a strong, specific letter of reference. So if you think about, for example, applying for a Fulbright English teaching assistantship, for example, maybe you did really good work in somebody's class. They know your academic work really well. They may or may not know anything about why you're interested in applying for Fulbright or why you're interested in teaching English as a foreign language abroad. And the more they know about that specifically, the better they can address that in what they write as your references. So you're helping them out as well as helping yourself. We're not yet done with the sleuthing. One of the things that you want to think about as you're exploring the application that you're proposing and the opportunity for which you're applying is to think about audience. You want to think about what this application is looking for. Is there a committee reading this? Who are they? What is it that they are likely to be curious about? If you can find out about the mission or the criteria of the organization you're proposing to join or the opportunity for which you're applying, that'll help you figure out what's most important to tell the audience to help them figure out what you bring to the table as a candidate and as a good fit for what it is that they're looking for. Thinking about audience can also be helpful because it helps you aim your writing, your application at the right audience. Are you writing for a potential employer? Are you writing for the professors who would be teaching you in the graduate program to which you're applying? Because that's typically how graduate and professional school admissions works rather than through a general admissions office. Are you writing for specialists in your field? A National Science Foundation graduate research fellowship, for example, you're writing for scientists in your field. Or are you writing for an educated but mixed audience, which may or may not include specialists in your field, as is the case for, say, Wellesley College postgraduate fellowships, which draws on faculty from departments all across campus. That, again, helps you figure out how to talk about the kinds of things that you want to talk about to be sure that your audience understands and is persuaded by the kinds of things that you're talking about. You want to make it really easy for the audience to find what they're looking for. As smart as they may be, as carefully as they may be reading, to the extent that you can make it really easy for them to find what they're looking for, they'll really appreciate that. And that always helps in your application. Having done a little bit of homework, the next thing, and for those of you who've engaged with career education, you know we're really big on reflection. You want to think about what you've discovered through research. What are the main points that you might want your application to convey to the audience? What is it that you want the reader to take away from your application to help them see why you're a good fit for that particular program and how it's a good fit for you? Before I start writing, I like to start with a blank piece of paper and brainstorm the parts that I want to make, a kind of an idea map. You might even try starting this right now. Think about, why is this thing for which you're applying a good fit? What makes you excited about it? What makes you want to apply for it in the first place? What might you hope to learn from whatever it is that you're applying for, whether it's a job or a graduate program or a fellowship? What might you hope to contribute? What might you bring to the table that might be useful in terms of what it is that they're looking for? As you're thinking about what you might hope to contribute, some specific questions to think about are, what are the relevant things in your education, your training, your experience, which give you a good foundation for whatever it is you're proposing to do? It might be classes, it might be research experience in the lab or not in the lab, it might be an internship, it might be something you did through civic engagement, it might be through other extracurricular activities. You might have been paid for this experience or not paid for this experience. The bottom line is, what are the relevant transferable experiences that you have, and what are the relevant transferable skills that you may already have? Do you have research skills that are helpful for whatever it is you're proposing to do? Do you have languages, whether human or computer? It doesn't have to be fancy. If it's a relevant skill, a relevant experience, if it's relevant, put it in the application somewhere. Did you gain relevant people skills from waiting tables to help pay for college? Again, this is not about how fancy an experience it is. It's whether or not it's relevant to the application at hand. Think creatively about how you may have acquired relevant transferable skills and experience that will help prepare you for whatever it is you're applying to do.
We have a question.
Okay, great.
How do you find out who makes up the committee that reads your application? Is that something usually put on the websites?
Oh, that's a good question. If you couldn't hear Caitlin, somebody's asked, how do you find out who your audience is and who makes up the committee? Different opportunities will list things differently, and there's usually a fair amount of information. For a graduate program, for example, it is faculty who would be teaching you if you were to get into said graduate or professional program. Fellowships usually have some information about the kinds of people who serve on various committees. It's often former winners of whatever the fellowship is. For Wellesley Awards and for any campus committee, you are likely to be working with a group of faculty, though some committees are primarily alumni or other kinds of things. We don't typically share specific names of who's on a committee, though some fellowship committees, say externally, are really transparent about that. The Truman, for example, will tell you exactly who's on a specific regional committee. Otherwise, it's more generally, as for example, the sort of graduate and professional school example, or for something like Wellesley funded internships. It's a mixed group of faculty and staff, but it's a Wellesley audience, and so that's one of the things to be thinking about. You may not always be able to tell, but it's worth trying to find out, if you can, what kinds of folks typically serve on a committee that you're proposing to apply for. It's a great question. Again, as you're thinking about that audience and trying to figure out what they may be looking for and what kinds of questions they may be bringing to your application, thinking about what whatever it is has said their mission is or their selection criteria are, that will help you figure out what kinds of things they'll be looking for in your application. As you're thinking about the mission statement or the description of whatever it is that you're applying for, it may be straightforwardly a job description. How does what you're applying to do align with your own interests? Where did those interests come from? What's shaped them? Why should the reader be interested in this too? Why should they care about this or want to see you do this? Probably most of the people who are applying for something are going to be passionate or excited or interested in whatever it is they're applying for, hopefully, otherwise, why are they applying? And so one of the things that you can do is to try to help people see what you specifically bring to the table, or what particularly about a program interests you, how specifically it aligns with your interests, background, skills, preparation to this point. When you're talking about how exciting something is, for example, if you're proposing a self-designed project, as is the case for many fellowships, postgraduate fellowships in particular, you want them not only to see why you're excited about this, but help them see why what it is that you're proposing to do is interesting in and of itself. I sometimes tell the story about how my background is in early medieval history. And I know when I go to a dinner party, if somebody asks me about my research interests, I can start that conversation in such a way that they will turn to the person on the other side of them and start a conversation about something, anything, to be able to change the conversation. On the other hand, I can also start talking about my own particular interests in such a way that I draw people in and it makes them excited and interested, even if like they know nothing about early medieval history, they don't care about the history of the book, they've never read any Latin or whatever, but I can draw them in and make them see why I'm so excited about this. That's the kind of thing you want to do in an application. You want to engage your reader's interest. As you're thinking about whatever it is you're applying for, how does it fit into your future aims and aspirations? If the committee were to give you this opportunity, where might you run with this? Not only would you be able to do a good job in the internship or the graduate program or the fellowship, but in turn, what might that help you go do out in the world? How does this fit into the bigger picture? Questions that get asked in applications along the lines of, why should we choose you? The good news is they're not actually asking you to blow your own horn or say why you're the best thing since sliced bread or the most amazing candidate they've ever seen. They're just asking you to make an interesting case for what it is you're hoping to do and how this proposal would fit into that, how it might help you to do that thing you're hoping to do in the longer term better, to show what a good return on investment you might be, because you're a good fit, because the work you want to do in the world matters, and this would help you do it. And that would meet the mission of the program for which you're applying, et cetera. Again, to the extent that you can show that you are a good fit for what it is they're looking for, that's going to answer the question of why they should choose you. At the initial brainstorming phase, like, don't rule anything out. Just jot down anything that you're hoping to convey about you or your proposal in your application. No holds barred. Put anything down, however silly, frivolous, unrelated it may sound. Put anything down. Later on, as you go through the process, you can start thinking about what kinds of ideas fit together. Are there themes through the kinds of things that you're thinking are important? What's more or less relevant to the specific application at hand? Again, think about the questions they're asking in the application, the particular prompt they may be asking, the particular mission of whatever it is, the selection criteria of whatever it is. What are the things that are going to be more relevant to the application at hand? Which pieces of the application will best convey those things that are most relevant? Note that some things will be better said by others, like your recommenders. Remember, their job is to blow your horn. They can also provide expert opinions on your background, skills, abilities, promise for the future, etc. Some things might be conveyed by your resume, the sorts of details of the things that you've done. Some things may be in a transcript or sample of written work. There are lots of different things that might convey some of those important points. On the other hand, your personal statement could be the sort of guiding theme for this, but also it should be the things that, what are you in the best position to say? What is it that you want to say in answer? You always want to answer the question asked. You never want to do that awful politician's trick of answering the question you wish you'd been answered to make the points you want to make regardless. Always answer the question asked. And so one of the things as you're doing your homework is to think about what's the prompt for the personal statement that you're attempting to draft here. It could be really broad, like, please provide a personal statement of 1,000 words or fewer. I'm not kidding, that's an actual prompt for the roads, for example. Some of them are different. And so you want to think about what's the question asked, and therefore what kinds of things might you want to say in answer to that. Some essay prompts are much more specific, like the one that I've just put onto the screen, which is for Wellesley College's American Cities internship program. It has some really wonderful and specific prompts and things for you to think about. It's really helpful. It might be very descriptive and specific like this. And there's all kinds of things between the very broad personal statement of 1,000 words or fewer and a very specific prompt like this. Regardless of this specific essay prompt, it's up to you to decide what points you'd like to convey about yourself. What will be most relevant for the reader of this particular application? What's the argument you'd like to make in this essay? Because a well-written personal statement should be persuasive. There should be an argument that is, at least in subtext, that, to help the reader see why you're a really good fit for what it is that the opportunity is looking for. There is no winning formula. If there were a winning formula for how to write the perfect personal statement, can you imagine any committee wanting to read dozens or hundreds or thousands of essays written to one formula? Oh my goodness, that would be so incredibly boring. But that's the other thing. Every single person who applies for something is unique. Even if you're applying to do something that a lot of other people want to do, like go to medical school. And even if some of the motivations for going to medical school, even if some of your motivations are not all that dissimilar from other people's motivations, you are not like any other person. You want your essay to say whatever it is you want to do. That makes this challenging. There is no formula. You're smart. If I gave you the formula, you could write an essay to meet it. But the exciting thing is that there is no one way to do this. They're not looking for a platonic ideal of an applicant for medical school or for any other program. They want to know more about you and how you fit whatever it is that they're offering. So go back to your idea map and think about what are the points that you might most want your personal statement to convey, and what it is that you need to say in your personal statement as opposed to what your recommenders say or other aspects of the application might say. And then start writing. For me, the hardest part of anything is before I actually get going doing it. The blank page is the worst thing. Once you have something, anything to work with, it's easier. Once I've got my feet into the water, no matter how cold the water is, it's easier to keep going. Some pro tips as you're working on essays. Start as early as you can to give yourself time to try different versions. You are the same person, but there may be different aspects of yourself that you want to bring out in answer to a particular question or in response to applying for a particular program. You want to give yourself time to walk away for a little bit and come back with fresh eyes. My brain is like the soup pot on the back burner of the stove. I can toss the vegetables into the water and put the heat on, but unless there's time for that to simmer away, it's going to be water and vegetables. It's not actually going to be soup. So giving yourself a little bit of time for things to sort of come together. Giving yourself a chance literally to walk away and get the blood flowing. Giving yourself time to seek advice and feedback is really helpful. You may not be able to get feedback with a quick turnaround time, especially at busy seasons when folks are awfully busy, whether you're thinking about like application season for graduate and professional programs. If you're asking faculty members for letters and for feedback at the same time that lots of other people are also applying for graduate and professional programs, that can be hard, for example. Never mind that, yep, my calendar gets booked up at particular seasons. But other folks can be busy too. To the extent that you can plan ahead and start early, that can be really helpful, not only for your own stress, but to give the people from whom you might seek advice or feedback time to be able to do things, and hopefully, no matter how busy they are, to fit things into their calendar reasonably. One of the benefits of talking over, for example, a personal statement with folks who are writing recommendations is that not only, again, will they be able to give you good advice about whatever it is you're doing, and if you're applying to graduate or professional school and you're writing for faculty in your field, don't you want to see what faculty in your field think of the draft of your personal statement? But again, remember that it's also helpful for your recommenders, who will therefore know something more about whatever it is that you're applying for, and that will make, in turn, their job easier of writing letters easier. Again, having time to try different drafts, to try different approaches. Yes, you're the same person with the same background, skills, experience, interests, but some of these will be more relevant for one application than for another, and you want to be able to tailor your application for the specific opportunity for which you're applying. You may also want to try a couple of different approaches, right? There's more than one way to tell a story. Giving yourself a chance to see which one might feel best for you or feel most persuasive for you is a helpful thing to be able to do. Another thing, again, is, and I know I've not said this once, but a couple of times already, but bear with me because it's important, consider your audience. Remember the selection criteria for whatever it is you're applying for, the mission statement. What are they looking for? Who is your audience and how technical should you be in answering this? What are you assuming that your reader will know about you, your field, your proposal, Wellesley? Some of the acronyms at Wellesley are not transparent to other people off campus, nor will they necessarily know what being a first-year mentor means or why that's interesting or valuable. Will they know what the heck Tanner is? This is also important for your resume and CV and short answers, by the way, because again, you want to make the reader's job as easy as possible, because no matter how smart the reader is, how thoughtful, how carefully the person is reading, or how few applications that person is reading, any committee member reading something, anybody reading an application, if you've made their job easier, they appreciate that. If you put them in a good mood, that helps, right? Not that people are superficial, but it always helps. They appreciate it when you're being thoughtful and making their job easier. All of that may be relatively straightforward. Signposting, what the heck is that? For those of you who haven't worked with me before, the way I think about this is, one of the most common things that I've heard from committees over the years is, oh my goodness, cut to the chase faster. I had to get to like the third page or the fourth paragraph before I figured out where this essay was going. If you give them a signpost right at the beginning of the essay, a rough indicator at least of where it is you're going to take them, they can relax and enjoy the journey with you. They're not going to be sort of skimming ahead to try to find where are you going with all of this? If they have a sense, they can relax and enjoy that. The other thing is that kind of context helps them understand some of the other things that you're saying in your essay and makes it more powerful. So it's signposting is actually a really helpful thing to do early on in an essay. You never want to bury the lead, and you always want to make it, again, as easy as possible for the reader to find exactly what they're looking for. Last but not least, it is really important to proofread. Really. You want somebody who hasn't read your essay a million times already to proofread for you too. It's not that readers are small-minded or petty or are going to ding you necessarily for making a small mistake, but typos and things can distract the reader from the good things you have to say, and you never want to do that. It can also, if there are a lot of them, suggest that you haven't put a lot of time or thought or effort into the application, and it can kind of suggest that maybe the reader doesn't need to either. That's not a message you ever want to send. So, lots of advice. What actually might this look like in practice? Here is a sample essay that was published in the Chronicle of Higher Education by someone who was listed as female science professor and who had read way too many not so hot grad school essays. And so took this, yes, frivolous stab at what not to do. As you're reading through this, what do you make of it? Why do you think I, for example, thought this was hilariously funny? Or what do you think works or doesn't work about this? Can you tell something as basic as what subject the applicant is applying to study? I don't know about you, I'm absolutely not sure. That's not helpful. Quotes, for example, may or may not be helpful. These anecdotes aren't required. There are all kinds of ideas about how personal statements should be written. Remember, there's no formula. There's no one right or wrong way to do this. The title of the article in the Chronicle of Higher Ed was "Leave Dr. Seuss Out of It." The point being, like, yep, however transformative your reading of Dr. Seuss years ago may have been, you've grown and developed a little bit since then. And if you're applying for graduate school, we're a little more curious to know what you've been reading and thinking about recently. Again, you want to think about what's the audience looking for, what's the opportunity at hand, and what's most relevant for that application. So there are all kinds of things that you do or don't want to do in an essay. As you're learning a new genre, it makes perfect sense for you to want to look for sample essays. And there are zillions of sample essays for pretty much anything available online. A caveat about that: yes, there are sample essays all over the internet, and I do understand your motivation in seeking them out. But I strongly suggest that you not look at any sample essays until after you've had a serious attempt at writing your own first draft. For one thing, it's really hard to hear what you have to say with lots of other people's voices in your ears. The other thing is that you want to be cautious about reading sample essays even after you've done a draft of your own. Who said this was a good sample essay? Anybody can put anything online these days. It might not be a good essay at all, even if somebody got into the program or won an opportunity at hand. Even if it's a winning essay, it has been known for people to win an opportunity despite a less than brilliant personal statement. Yep, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do your level best to write the strongest possible personal statement that you can. But even a quote unquote winning essay may not actually be a great sample for you to follow. The other thing is that even if that essay was a great representation of who that person was, you're not that person. And the thing for which you're applying may or may not be exactly the same as what that person applied for. And you want your essay to tell your story. So be cautious about looking at sample essays. And even as you are trying to get a sense of a new genre, do remember that there is no formula and that there are many, many different kinds of strong essays. I can say this after more than a decade and having read literally thousands of essays. There are as many good personal statements as there are good candidates out there. And what it is that you're trying to do is tell your own personal story. There are also folks who are happy to help you wrestle with this. If you're applying for fellowships, do by all means talk to Caitlin and me about essays, talk to your recommenders, talk to various folks. Brainstorm whom you might seek out for advice. There's some great online advice. Speaking of online advice, if you go, for example, to the New Career Education website, and there's some terrific resources in Handshake as well. These happen to be resources for graduate school, but they're also resources to help people applying for internships, for fellowships, and many other things. And if you watch the events listings on our website, you'll find other workshops, info sessions, panels, career and grad school fairs, all sorts of exciting other resources. What other resources do you have? People. You're not in this alone. As smart and as capable as you are, you don't have to do this all by yourself. As you're thinking about who you might talk to about your application, think about to whom might you turn for advice, whether or not you're going to ask that person for a reference. Absolutely, my colleagues and I in career education are here to help. But during the academic year, you might also reach out to folks at the PLTC. You may be reaching out to professors, former internship supervisors, and other folks for whom you might from whom you might ask references. Think about, as my boss, Christine Cruz Vergara, likes to say, who's on your personal advisory board? Who are the people you can turn to advice? Can you get some help here? One of the questions I get asked a lot is, gosh, if people have helped me out, will I be letting them down if I don't get whatever it is I'm applying for? And I'm here to tell you the answer is no. Remember, I've been doing this for more than a decade. I've worked with lots of recommenders, lots of faculty members, lots of various members of the community, and they never feel like it's a waste of time, especially if you are doing this in sensible and respectful fashion. You're making mindful use of their time. You're engaging thoughtfully with the process. So they're glad to help you out and support you. Do what you can to make their job easier, and be sure to keep them posted. They're rooting for you. They'd love to hear about outcomes no matter what they are. They'd love to hear what you learned from the process and what you gained from talking with them. All of that is valuable. And it's all valuable as you're applying for other opportunities going forward. And once, for example, somebody's written you a reference for one opportunity, they have that draft, just like that draft I was talking about earlier for you of your personal statement. And it's easier to rework it for other things in future and to update it and amplify it and make it specific to a particular opportunity. You'll be doing the same thing with your materials. Trust that recommenders do that too. All of this is part of the learning process and part of your larger education at Wellesley. It's our job to help, and we are really glad to do it, especially when you approach this in professional, respectful, and timely fashion. But if you're on this webinar, you're already doing that, so don't be shy. Best of luck as you're applying for things. Take the leap. What's the worst that can happen is you don't get whatever it is, but you learn from the process, and you have a stronger application the next time around. None of this is wasted effort. I've raced through a lot of material really quickly. Are there particular questions or concerns that you have? How might I be able to be helpful with you? Don't be shy about putting questions into the chat box. If you're wondering about this, chances are somebody else is too, and they'll be really glad that you asked. And either, because maybe they were too shy to do it, or that maybe because you thought of something they didn't. In any event, thank you so much for joining us today, and I look forward very much to talking further with you.
We'll hang out for just a few minutes in case you want to type in your questions. We're monitoring the chat box.
Yeah, writing personal statements is difficult. Because there's no formula, because you learn and grow and change. Even a personal statement that you wrote last month may be out of date by this point, or it may not be a good fit for whatever the new opportunity you're applying for is. One of the neat things about applying for something like this, and part of why I say none of it is wasted effort, is that if the worst that comes out of an application process like this is that you have a clearer sense of who you are, what your interests and strengths are, you've had practice making a case for the kinds of transferable skills and experience and interests that you bring to the table. All of that is grist to the mill. And even if you never apply for another fellowship, if you never apply for the same kind of internship, or you never apply for another grad program or whatever, you will certainly be applying for things through your life, if only other jobs. And so to be thinking about what you bring to the table, how this fits into the bigger picture, practicing making a good case for yourself, all of it's good grist to the mill. It's never wasted.
We have another question. When do you think the best time is to ask for a faculty member to review your personal statement? Almost finished, outline form, or brainstorming?
Oh, that's a great question. In case you couldn't hear it, the question was, when's the best time to ask a faculty member to review a personal statement? When it's almost finished, when it's an outline, when you're brainstorming. Some of that will depend on you and your working method, and some of it will depend on the faculty member. What kind of relationship do you have with that person? How busy is that person? What might their preference be? And I would really suggest, if you feel comfortable sharing at various points in the process, it's worth seeing what the faculty member might be most interested or have time to do. You want to be mindful of people's time. And so, asking them for lots of rounds of feedback might be more than they can do, especially if, as most people are, they're teaching a lot of people, they're working with a lot of applicants. Remember that not only will they have their current students, but they'll have graduates coming back and asking for references in future, that kind of thing. So you want to be mindful of people's time. You also don't know what they're doing in terms of their own research, preparation for classes, grading papers or exams, writing grant proposals, working on book projects, what's going on in their family lives or personal lives. There's a lot going on, so you want to be mindful of people's time, but everybody's different. I am totally willing, and Caitlin is totally willing, to look at a draft at any stage, whether it's bullet points or brainstorming or a polished draft. What we're worried about is, when will this be useful for you? One of the things that is often recommended when you're applying for things is to be able to give your recommenders a draft of your materials, which is really good advice, but don't wait to ask for a reference until, for example, you have a polished draft right before a deadline. That doesn't give people enough time to plan, regardless of their busy schedules. Again, what you may want to do is say, once somebody has agreed to write a letter for you or write a reference for you, you may say, what can I do to be helpful to you? Would you like to see drafts? Would you like to see an outline? Would you like to wait until a polished draft? If this is the application deadline, by when would you want to see whatever it is that you want to see? Let the faculty member or other partner have some input in that, as well as thinking about what makes sense for you. And I think, even a rough outline or draft can be useful to somebody. And for the most part, we understand that that's probably not the draft you're going to be handing in. And I certainly wouldn't think any of the less of you for not sharing the most polished thing. But again, I think it'll depend on who your partner is and who the faculty member is. Everybody has different working styles, right? And different reading styles and preferences. Some people are really excited to be part of the whole planning process and the brainstorming. Other people are like, okay, I am crazy busy. I need you to give me just a fairly polished draft by X deadline, in which case, follow their lead, I think is really the best thing. But I love that you're asking that question and thinking thoughtfully about your recommenders. The other thing is, for internship applications, for grad school applications, remember my colleagues here in career education are always delighted to help with that. You might, if you're a current student, want to share drafts, say, of an internship application with your college career mentor. College career mentors are wonderful at seeing strengths and values and helping you explore your career and figure out the best way to make the best case for yourself. On the other hand, the college career advisors, community career advisors, and I've got the terminology wrong, I apologize, the CCAs, are also wonderful, and they have expertise in particular fields. So, for example, they may have a lot of experience, as Lynn White does, reading applications for medical school. And so her expertise with that particular application can be hugely valuable. Emma Cutrufalo knows law school essays and applications really well. On the other hand, Frances Adrololo is a wonderful reader of applications, for example, for grad programs in the physical sciences, engineering, and tech. Again, think about what kinds of help you need with something and who might be available. But the more that you plan ahead, the more options you'll have.
We're also happy to answer specific questions. If you're writing a personal statement for Watson or Stevens or something like that, please feel free to chime in.
Well, the good news is career education is here year-round, as is fellowships, and I've put general email addresses on the slide so that you can get hold of us with particular questions. Whatever you're applying for, we wish you all very best of luck, and we're delighted that you could join us today. Take care, be brave, take the plunge. Remember, you have nothing to lose and everything to gain.